Winds howled ominously late into the afternoon as the sun shone bright in the sky. Hot on the heels of the wind was a wall of fire that blazed through the town of Lahaina, forcing families to seek refuge in the ocean. In the wake of the fire was a question that weighed heavily on the hearts of many. How did a morning brush fire turn into the deadliest US wildfire in a century in a matter of hours? Was it simply nature's wrath or a failure of human systems that turned Lahaina into a death trap? Lahaina, a coastal town on the leeward side of West Maui, is shaped not only by its unique geography, but also by its impressive history. Founded in 1802 as the capital of the Hawaiian Kingdom by King Kamehameha, its narrow streets are lined with dense neighborhoods and century-old landmarks that tell a rich story of its glorious past. But just above Lahaina lies a fringe of highly flammable and dry invasive grasses that formed a zone of wildland interface. Experts and researchers at the Fire Safety Research Institute warned that this intersection of wildland and urban areas creates a high-risk environment for wildfires to fester. This came true when the fire entered town, feeding on both natural and man-made fuels to quickly turn the town into a domain of flames. But here's the real question. If experts had warned about this exact danger for years, why was nothing done? The fire left widespread devastation in its wake, with estimated damages reaching between $4 and $6 billion. But this disaster did not arrive without signs. Days before the fire spread, forecasters had issued a warning of a high risk of wildfire across Maui, with weather models predicting powerful downslope winds. Further analysis later revealed that these winds were the signature of a mountain wave windstorm. Hurricane Dora, which passed approximately 1,300 kilometers to the south of Maui, did not have a significant impact on the occurrence and intensity of the winds associated with the wildfire event. Indeed, the groundwork for the fire to spread was already laid. Non-native grasses, squeezed dry of all moisture by drought, stretched continuously from fields in the hillside to deep inside the town. This invasive vegetation, dry as kindling, created a carpet of fuel ready to burn Lahaina to the ground. Extreme winds, dry grasses, and the wooden houses of the neighborhood created the perfect conditions for an ordinary spark to transform into an unstoppable disaster. Some now argue this wasn't a natural disaster at all, but a man-made catastrophe waiting to happen. On August 8, 2023, at approximately 6:35 a.m., a fast-moving brush fire broke out near Lahaina Intermediate School. Firefighters responded quickly to the call. Although the terrain made putting out the fire challenging, the crew was able to quench the flames before they could spread beyond control. By 2:17 p.m., the fire was reported as extinguished, and the firefighters returned to their quarters, oblivious to the danger ahead. At 2:55, barely 38 minutes after dousing the flames, reports came in of another fire at the same location. Sustained strong winds acted as a catalyst, causing the fire to spread at a terrifying rate. The strong winds carried embers, igniting unburned grassland areas downward from the location where the fire began. With these conditions, the fire spread out of control, reaching homes and other buildings. From this point, the blaze was propagated through direct flame contact from one building to another, with the consuming flames sending even more embers flying onward, spreading the inferno. Fierce winds forced the wildfire towards the Pacific Ocean, coursing through Lahaina. The enormous sea of flames overwhelmed the town's limited evacuation routes. By 3:30 p.m., the situation turned dire. Evacuation routes began to get clogged by traffic. Clearing the townspeople became increasingly difficult as fallen power poles and lines cut off the already dwindling available escape lanes, and thick smoke began to blind drivers. Cars were stalled, then abandoned, in a gridlock, sending passengers to flee on foot. For some, plunging into the ocean was the only escape. At this point, Lahaina was no longer in a state of emergency but in a catastrophe. Here's the controversial part. Did officials declare safety too early, underestimating the real danger? As the flames' hellish tentacles began to spread to every nook and cranny in Lahaina, the systems put in place to protect the town started failing. The island's outdoor sirens, designed to alert residents, did not activate. Officials were utilizing Lahaina's wireless emergency alert system. Cruelly, as if having a mind of its own, the fire engulfed the cell towers, plunging the town into an information void. And so it was. Many residents never received any warning. Imagine this: the world's most advanced nation, and not a single siren warned people of the flames. How is that even possible? The command chain's communication backbone was shattered. With no cell service, police and fire units were forced to switch to separate radio channels. Dispatchers had to juggle 5 or 6 channels, which made it difficult to know which calls to prioritize. The situation spiraled out of control as confusion spread over the status of power lines, leaving responders uncertain about live hazards. The fire's devastation was far from over. The hydrants were the next to collapse under the flames' fury. As power grids failed, the pumps lost power. As buildings were destroyed, their plumbing breaks, pouring out massive amounts of life-saving water. The plumbing system failures created a collapse in water pressure, making several open hydrants run dry, further complicating the situation. Later, leading researchers would describe the situation as a classic wildland-urban interface breakdown. What good are fire hydrants if they run dry in the middle of hell? Throughout the raging fire blazing through the West Maui neighborhoods, residents headed towards the only paved road out of town in cars, desperate to escape the inferno. But the fire was faster, barricading Highway 30 and forcing cars back towards the city. One family managed to swerve around the barricade and found safety 48 minutes later in a nearby town. Others were also able to find escape routes through the chaos, saved from the unrelenting barrage of flames. Not everyone was so lucky. Dozens found themselves caught in a firestorm, with cars jammed together on the narrow road. Surrounded by flames in 3 directions, the rocky ocean waves became their only way out of the hellscape. As some perished in cars, others successfully found refuge in the ocean, clinging to sea walls for hours as the fire swallowed the shoreline behind them. One survivor who made several trips into town to look for others who had survived. The witness reported seeing people trapped on their balconies as the winds continued to push the fire towards their homes. He managed to save a girl whose legs had been severely burned, and this compelled him to seek the back roads in a frantic search to save as many people as he could. The death toll would have been even higher if not for the bravery of first responders. Nevertheless, their rescue efforts were massively frustrated as engines got trapped in the burnover, forcing crews to scramble for cover and save themselves. Yet this did not deter from calling to residents and guiding them toward the ocean. Fire scientists have shed more light on the mechanics of urban conflagration to determine how the fire spread so quickly. The flames initially began as a grass fire at the outskirts of the town. Although fast spreading, it was still outside Lahaina's core region. Efforts made to contain the fire were progressing until the flames crossed into the neighborhood, rapidly gaining momentum. Strong winds transported a large number of embers, which turned into a storm of firebrands that rained down on rooftops and across all neighborhood blocks. Each ember was a match, sparking simultaneous ignitions that quickly overwhelmed firefighters. From there, the fire's spread was unstoppable. Houses began to ignite other houses, and flames leapt from one structure to the next through the narrow gaps that separated them. The proximity of homes and tight streets that defined Lahaina's landscape became fuel for the ravaging fire. Water pressure collapsed on a massive scale, and access routes were blocked, which hindered efforts made to contain the fire. The Fire Safety Research Institute called it the classic recipe for a runaway disaster. Wind-driven embers, limited water supply, and clogged evacuations led to a complete failure of the town's protection system. In the aftermath of the tragedy that claimed over 100 lives, investigators began to comb through the mountains of ashes in an effort to understand how the fire started. The Fire Safety Research Institute and the Hawaii Attorney General's Office led 2 independent reviews to get to the root cause of the flames. Both independent parties agreed that the disaster did not stem from a single cause, but rather the dry fuels, fierce winds, fragile infrastructure, broken communications, and clogged escape routes combined to create the deadly masterpiece. Investigations into the origin and cause of the fire continue. However, the Fire Safety Research Institute documented 84 findings and 140 recommendations, which include hardening water systems, strengthening evacuation planning, and implementing more resilient alerts when cell networks are disrupted. What emerged from the investigations was not just a record of what went horribly wrong, but a roadmap of lessons learned so that in case another fire returns, the systems will remain secure. Unless tested, there is a haunting truth. If another fire sparked tomorrow, will Maui really be any safer? Lahaina was left with immeasurable losses on that day. A historic town full of families and memories got forcibly altered in a single afternoon. But along with the devastation came astounding clarity, opening the public's eyes to how dry grasslands were incredible fuel for fire's cataclysmic rage. The possibilities of what could go wrong also became very clear. Communications, water pressure, and escape routes can fail catastrophically, which necessitates a more comprehensive and practiced approach to handling a similar occurrence, given the many lives that depend on these protective systems. Throughout the tragedy, the community of Lahaina demonstrated its strong community bond as neighbors pulled each other from the firm grip of the flames. First responders stood against almost impossible odds, yet they managed to rescue and find a refuge for families in the ocean. The flames may have scarred the land, but they've also ignited a resilient spirit of renewal that carries Lahaina forward. After asking all these hard questions of what went wrong, the question still lingers. Will this Lahaina tragedy be its last?